Hello everyone, this is Turin here, and today guys I'm here with another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle I'm going to be playing the Greenskins and I am facing off against Norsca. So let's go ahead and take a look at the army compositions and we can go from there. So in the front line I do have a combination of Black Orcs and Big Uns. So the Black Orcs are essentially there to deal with Marauder champions, because if you just bring a bunch of Big Uns and Orc boys and things like that don't really have good armor piercing values, you're going to have trouble getting through the the heavy armor of champions. And granted, it's not a lot, but 80 armor you still need a little bit of AP to get through that. So I definitely like to bring Black Orcs for that reason. And the other reason Black Orcs are good is because they are immune to psychology. So if they are using the Soul Crusher or Marauder Chieftain or Wolfric on a Mammoth, you definitely want some of your frontline troops to be a little bit more durable and not just terror route. Whereas Big Uns, if I'm not mistaken, are not immune to psychology. So they will terror out against Mammoths and other large units, even though they do have anti-large. But I do bring the Big Uns as well, because Big Uns, granted, they have 42 weapon strength, and Black Orcs themselves have 42, but Big Uns are very, very good at cutting through lightly armored troops. So against like Marauders and things like that, they're going to, cut through them incredibly fast. Granted, they do get kind of taken out by Berserkers, but nonetheless, if they do have Berserkers and very high DPS units in the front line, you just send in your Black Orcs. Because the Black Orcs have 110 armor, so against, the low armor piercing damage of Berserkers, they're going to be very durable. So that's pretty much my entire front line, and what I usually end up doing anyways is detaching one of my Big Uns, because Big Uns are actually a really good answer to Skin Wolves. They have decent armor themselves. 50 isn't bad, but really they have good weapon strength and they do have a bit of an anti-large bonus of +8. So against Skin Wolves they trade really, really efficiently. I like that matchup quite a bit. So aside from that, I do have 4 Goblin Archers, one of them being the Rusty Arrows to help take down Mammoths. Unfortunately, my opponent didn't bring Mammoths. He actually brought a very scary army composition. I'm excited to show you guys. I do have 2 groups of Orc Boy Big Uns, one of them being the Broken Tusk Mob. So the reason I bring the Broken Tusk Mob is simply because they are much more durable. They have 90 armor compared to the 55 of the Orc Boy Big Uns. So against Skin Wolves, regular Skin Wolves, which are very common against Greenskins, because they don't have big armored units. Generally, aside from the Arachnaut Queen, having that extra 50 armor is really good against regular Skin Wolves, whose armor piercing values aren't great. Granted, the Maws of Savagery will do some work against these guys. Aside from that, I do have a Night Goblin Shaman with the Sneaky Stealin', and he does have the Sneaky Stabbin' as well as the Itchy Nuisance. For my leadership, I do have an Orc War Boss, and this guy is an MVP in this matchup. He's very, very essential. So if there's a Mammoth kind of rampaging in your back lines, he has enough mass to just fly head on into the Mammoth, get a nice charge, poison it, obstruct its movement for a moment, and then kind of get out of there. It's a very mobile, the Wyverns are quite mobile. So on top of that, he does have poison. So all Wyverns now, since the most recent Norsca patch, excuse me, they do have poison attacks. Azag on a Wyvern does have poison attacks, even without the Spider Banner, which I guess actually has been removed from the game. So Orc War Boss, in my opinion, is probably the best pick against Norsca. They don't really have any units to contest the skies, so you get free range and can really dictate the pace of the battle and go after casters and different things like that. So that's pretty much it for my army. I do have some Squig Hoppers in the front, Durkit Squigs. These guys are great in the front line. They have a true anti-infantry bonus, if I'm not mistaken, and also will poison those frontline troops. So for my opponent, definitely very different from the Norscan armies I've been facing, and it caught me off guard a little bit. So I brought a very heavy Goblin presence, Goblin Archers, to take down Mammoths, because you guys saw in my last Greenskin versus Norsca battle, I was able to really just gun down a Mammoth within like 15 to 30 seconds of the fighting starting. But here, he went extremely wide, and it was actually really tough to deal with. So he brought in Marauder Chieftain on a Chariot, just going very cheap. I mean, you can see he stripped all the abilities, just going as wide as he possibly can. But nonetheless, Chariots are going to be really good against Big Uns, and even against Black Orcs, they'll do pretty well. He has 2 Skin Wolves on the far side, and then over here, he also has another 2 Skin Wolves, so 4 Skin Wolves in total. I usually figure that my 2 Orc Big Uns plus my War Boss and, Big Boss can handle the Skin Wolf presence, but with this composition, it's going to be extremely rough, guys. He does have 4 Skin Wolves. Aside from that, he has just standard Marauders in the front line, which honestly, with their unit density, will, do well. I mean, the Black Orcs obviously will win, but for the cost, they're going to be mucked up for quite some time. And, if these guys can fight for long enough, they will get that enraged mechanic. So for those of you guys that haven't seen it, the enraged mechanic does give 8 leadership, 12 physical resist, and then 8 melee attacks. So they become, quite fearsome. On top of that, he does have some Marauders with great weapons. Those guys will trade really well with Black Orcs. So as long as he can keep them away from my Big Uns, he'll be fine. And then last but not least, he does have some Javelins. So Javelins, not bad against the Greenskins. I like that he only brought 2. It's a limited amount, but it gives him great utility at kind of, poking at my Flying Lord, who has some armor, but not the most. So the anti-large Javelin should do, some pretty good work, but yeah, guys, we'll see. So without further ado, let the games begin. In the front line, my opponent did come up with the Shaman Sorcerer, and he tried to catch me with this purple sun right now, but I actually was able to pull back. I had a big blob formation, marching right into that. So as soon as it starts to wear off, I'm just going to be reforming my forces here. In the meantime, he does actually have a Feral Manticore as well. So that was also an interesting inclusion. Gives him a little bit of an air presence. Granted, the Manticore is really just going to, take a huge beating from this Orc War Boss here. Orc War Boss has poison, and I do not think Manticores do. They do not. and his weapon strength is lower in armor and everything else, basically. So I'm just, you know, forming up ranks here on the ridge. You can see the Biggins and the Black Orcs are going to meet these Norskins in the valley right here. I do have a little bit of a high ground advantage, which is quite nice. So you can see they're going to slam in here, and the Black Orcs are literally just going to take these guys apart. You can see the Marauders are just getting massacred, whereas their attacks are kind of bouncing off the 110 armor of these Black Orcs here. So on the far side, this is definitely going to be a heated point of battle. You can see my Orc War Boss is going to be jumping on this Wyvern. Some King Kong and Godzilla action going on. Always a good time. And the Wyvern here is poisoned, but look at that. 1 or 2 attacks here, and the Goblin Wolf Riders here also have the Wa. So they're adding a little bit of damage against the 45 armor, and he pretty much just got broken off the battlefield. But now it's time where things get down and dirty. So the Skin Wolves are able to surround my Goblin Big Boss, who charged in a little bit ahead of his guys, and you can see the poor Goblin Big Boss is just here just being ravaged by these Skin Wolves. Definitely not fun for him. But over here, my Boars, we're going to charge and help the Big Boss, but then I was like, hey, let's just collapse on the back of these Skin Wolves. We have a great rear charge right here, so the Boars are going to charge in here and are going to start lancing some of these guys for sure. So you know, these Wolf Riders obviously going to get cut down, and did I send them somewhere else? I could have sworn I was sending them into these guys, but regardless, it looks like some of them came to fight. I don't know where the other ones are going. Oh no, looks like the Broken Tusk Mob was coming here. But the Skin Wolves here are taking a huge amount of damage, but we haven't killed a lot of models, so if they do retreat now, they should be fine. In the front line, it's a pretty wild fight. Here, you can see the Biggins are really just massacring these Marauders. They already have 31 kills. These Black Orcs here have 71, so the Marauders just got the break speed off them. But my opponent actually had a good purple sun right here. I didn't get a chance to really show you guys, but you know, it was actually like hitting some of my Biggins and did some pretty good HP damage. So definitely some wild stuff here in the front. But you can see these Norscan Marauders having a really rough time against the Greenskin infantry. I don't know, Greenskin infantry overall are just so gangster. I mean, they hit hard. They're just powerful. I really like the Greenskin infantry corps. But over here, my opponent was able to do a little bit better. You can see his, some Marauders with great weapons, and his chariots have been really kind of running amok, and he had a whole nother 2 groups of Skin Wolves, so I had to detach one of my Orc Boars to kind of intercept these guys, but the Skin Wolves are going to massacre them. Skin Wolves with the regeneration are just going to put these guys down, and you know, the armor piercing of these guys isn't really going to be terribly useful against the unarmored variant. You know, I was expecting Maws of Savagery and you know, Mammoths and things like that, but you can see these Skin Wolves are at 18, and my guys are down to 24 at about half health, so very, very rough trade so far. But regardless, my opponent does kind of see some blood in the water. You can see he's going after some of my Jerkit Squig Hoppers right here. So these guys are starting to get swarmed down by the Skin Wolves. And yeah, poor little Squig. I always feel bad seeing those guys go down. But regardless, I do have a Goblin firing line, so I had to reform ranks. So he was able to compromise my back line a little bit with all these Skin Wolves and pressure on the back. And you can see my front line's getting worn down a little bit. So over here, I was able to win this particular battle. So I pulled some Biggins back here to be on guard duty. So I put them behind my archers. And the other group of Black Orcs I sent over to the main battle. So these Black Orcs are kind of fighting in the pocket versus a bunch of Skin Wolves. And, you know, they'll have a good matchup here because these Skin Wolves don't have great, you know, AP values. But the Black Orcs, you know, again, with their 110 armor should be fine, but my opponent does have his Chariot in here. So the Chariot's doing some heavy work, and I make a really, really risky play. I actually land my War Boss in here, and I tried to get some burst DPS on his Chieftain, and I did some okay work, but it was not worth it because the Skin Wolves just swarmed. They smelled blood in the water, and my opponent also has a pretty healthy little firing line of Javelins over here. So I'm getting speared and just punished down. I do pop my potion of Foolhardiness and Toughness, so I'm unbreakable, and I'm able to get away. So I squeak out the back, and these Black Orcs are just they're just troopers, just standing in there fighting, completely surrounded. But my Goblin firing line's doing very well. You can see my opponent tried to get some Skin Wolves over here, but the Biggins were able to intercept them. And these Biggins just do extremely well against Skin Wolves, and I honestly think they're one of the answers against Norscan, you know, flanking attacks and things like that. So they're able to kind of head these guys off, and my Goblins, you know, yeah, look at the boys protecting their little lads right here. So things are going pretty well for the Goblins. They're able to keep firing. I'm just laying constant pressure on this guy, just trying to do as much as I can. But you can see his Marauder Chieftain comes in here with the Chariot, and he's going to run in and unfortunately get through some of my guys. But you can see the War Boss coming in the distance, just flying all menacing. He's coming to get this Deathcaster for sure. So the Death Shaman, he's relatively squishy. He only has 50 armor, so the Biggins are able to intercept. I do pop Sneaky Stabbing, so you can see he's going to start taking some damage here. There's 40, there's another 40, and he just took about 300 HP in damage in a very, very rapid succession. My Orc Boss is coming in pretty heavy. He's going to get in there and probably be able to burst him down. So man, I love the slow-mo just flying. He just knows his doom is coming. So the Orc Boss is going to land with the support of the Biggins, and you can see the Deathcaster actually just gets wrecked and just popped off that Chariot. You can see ash and brimstone flying everywhere, so that was pretty cool. So the Orc War Boss, even though he's very beat up, still doing a good job. But the Skin Wolves, you know, have gotten in the chicken coop over here. They're going to be chasing down some of these Goblins, and you know, my Orc War Boss is still nearby, but he's incredibly squishy, so I have to make sure to avoid those Skin Wolves at all costs. I mean, I can kind of clip them and fight them, but if he's able to get a full surround, it's going to be very rough. So the Norscan hordes, even though their infantry corps looked to be losing like really hard early on, they were able to kind of you know, come back. You could just see so many groups of these Marauders who were very, very low, and they're all just kind of you know, still fighting and starting to swarm on me a little bit. So I have 48 Biggins here. You know, they're fighting here in the pocket versus some of these Skin Wolves, and I do pop the Itchy Nuisance here, which is going to be very helpful. You can see these Biggins decapitating and cutting the limbs off some of these Norskins, and look how much bigger the Biggins are than the Norskins. That's pretty crazy. I mean, The Orc Biggins are almost as large as the Skin Wolves, which is quite cool. Some black orcs, excuse me, a little bit of a tongue twister for me, are still fighting over here. There's 42 models. They are wavering, though, which is pretty grim, sitting around 14 leadership, but they do get that sneaky stabbing. So their stats are pretty off the chain right now. These Orc Biggins, 42 models there, also in pretty good shape. But in the back, I do land my Orc Orbasa. There was some Skin Wolves I had relatively isolated, and I didn't want to lose my Goblin Shaman, so I landed. But every time I land, I only have 1,000 HP. So every one of these like kind of landing maneuvers I do is extremely risky. You can see my opponent does have this Marauder Chieftain over here, kind of doing some good work, but I was able to reform a Goblin firing line. So my Goblin Archers over here, there's two groups. There's one here and one here, and some Goblin Wolf Riders are back online. And guys, I also do have some reinforcements coming from the far side. So the Orc Boar Biggins, the Broken Tusk Mob, just got finished chasing off some Skin Wolves from the map, and they returned, and I was able to rally, and you can see them just riding down these Skin Wolves and chasing them back to the Shadow Realm. But my opponent getting some really good Javelin fire, putting me down to 700 HP, so that's looking very grim. But nonetheless, my opponent's leader right here, this Marauder Chieftain, he's taking damage from the Rusty Arrows, and some Goblin Archers are going to be firing soon. And you can also see my Orc Warboss has kind of smelled blood in the water, so now he's poisoned. He's down to 61 speed, so my Warboss with his 100 speed is going to be able to chase him, and he is just in really, really bad shape here. I have the good armor piercing damage, and bam, he just gets popped down. Huge burst damage from that Orc Warboss. He is just a true MVP, taking out that Deathcaster and pretty much everything else. So you can see from there, the balance of power is really shifting, and the Orc Boars are coming back to save the day, just charging valiantly through these Norskins. Doesn't seem right to really use the word valiant to describe the orcs, but nonetheless they are. So they're getting in here, and these Marauder Javelins, even though you think they would have anti-large with some Javelins and kind of spear type things, they do not. So the Orc Warboss is coming in, and he's going to probably start terror routing a lot of these guys. It looks like even the Night Goblin Shaman's coming in to get a little bit of action. So from there, the Norskins don't really have much stopping power left. They've lost their chariots. Most of the Skin Wolves are pretty much routed or shattered off the battlefield, and that's going to be all she wrote. So that was an incredibly close battle. Like, it really came down to the wire there, and like the fact that we were able to get that Norscan Chieftain was a big part of it. But I really liked his use of the chariot play because, number one, with the Skin Wolves, I couldn't really contest and go after the chariots because normally you can send like a cav unit to deal with the chariot and it's just going to completely shut it down. But he then opened up the chariot play by going so heavily in Skin Wolves, and it was incredibly hard to like deal with those Skin Wolves. They were massacring a lot of my Biggins, but the Broken Tusk Mob, those guys were true MVPs. They did some huge work. And even though you guys saw in the beginning my Orc Warboss and my Orc Biggins, the Orc Warboy Biggins, were able to just annihilate those Skin Wolves, I only killed 2 models. So basically, they just came back and healed and were able to really just kind of generate value in the late game. The Biggins and Black Orcs, a very solid infantry corps against the Norskins. I like it quite a bit. The Biggins you can detach and use against Skin Wolves, and the Black Orcs honestly can handle pretty much any Norscan infantry. And should they bring Mammoths, you also have the Goblins and all that kind of stuff to work with. So guys, give this army composition a try. You can also use the Squigs as kind of a bottleneck just to kind of like lock up the Mammoths. Believe it or not, they actually do really well at kind of mucking up their feet and poisoning them. So yeah, guys, give this build a try. Let me know your thoughts. I've had a lot of success, and it's pretty much my go-to build versus Norsca as the Greenskins. But yeah, very well played to my opponent. It was a super close game, and I mean, honestly, like 1 or 2 more attacks on either of our lords, and that game could have gone in either of our favor. So very well played. Look forward to seeing you again on ladder. Krista Jankris. Yeah, I probably totally mangled that, but yeah, very well played, man. We'll see you next time. And hey, guys, thanks again for watching. We got more content coming soon, and have an excellent night.